It is 1981, and Michel Dufour is standing in a factory that, 17 years earlier, did not exist. Now it produces more sailboats than any other builder in France, and this week, it stops. The looms of fiberglass go still. The molds sit empty in rows, waiting for hulls that no one has ordered. The company that turned a locomotive engineer's garage experiment into Europe's leading production boat builder has run out of road. And for a brief, brutal stretch, Dufour Yachts simply fails. Orders dry up, production halts. The name that revolutionized what an ordinary family could afford to sail is, for a moment, in real danger of disappearing entirely, folded quietly into the long list of French shipyards that overreached and never recovered. To understand how a company gets from a garage in La Rochelle to a continental collapse to becoming, decades later, one of the 5 most respected sailboat builders on Earth, you have to go back to 1957 to a young engineer who was supposed to be building parts for trains. Michel Dufour arrives in La Rochelle after his military service and takes a job at a factory that manufactures locomotive components. He is put in charge of a workshop using a material still considered exotic in industrial France: polyester resin, reinforced with fiberglass, a substance most of his colleagues barely trust. Dufour is also, in every spare hour he has, a competitive sailor, obsessed with hull shapes, class rules, the physics of a boat moving through water. He spends his weekends racing on the water and his evenings sketching hulls that don't exist yet. Legend has it, his supervisor eventually catches him spending more time drawing yacht designs on the shop floor than doing his actual job, and tells him, half in exasperation, half in something close to respect, "Go build your boat then." So he does. In 1964, Dufour sells his car. He sells his own boat. He borrows what he can and rents a hangar on the outskirts of town, a space with no heat, no real equipment, nothing but bare concrete and ambition. Working alongside a colleague, Francis Deschamps, with almost no formal experience laminating fiberglass at scale, the two men begin building a 21-foot transportable sailboat by hand, one layer of resin and cloth at a time. They call the fledgling company Le Stratifié Industriel, industrial laminate. It is not a name built for glory. It is a name built by two men with a clay model of a deckhouse and nothing else to lose. 8 months later, the first boat, the Sylph, is finished. A sailor from northern France named Dominique Trontasseau buys it, and more importantly, believes in it enough to extend Dufour a financial lifeline that keeps the company breathing through its first winter when there is no second order yet on the books and every franc matters. What happens next moves fast enough to feel almost unreal. In 1965, the order book holds 20 boats. The following year, it holds 60. Word spreads through French sailing clubs that something different is happening in La Rochelle, a boat that ordinary people, not just the wealthy, can actually own. And then, in the late 1960s, Dufour launches the boat that will define the company's entire identity, the Arpège, a 29-foot cruiser that reimagines what livable space inside a small production sailboat could look like. The Arpège does not just sell. It triggers a wave of new workshops and new competitors across France, all scrambling to catch up to what Dufour has already built. More than 1,500 units leave the factory within a decade. By 1971, Dufour has outgrown the hangar entirely. Production moves into a 15,000 square meter facility in Périgny, and under the new banner of Dufour SA, the company begins turning out more than 300 boats a year, an industrial pace almost nobody in recreational sailing had attempted before, let alone achieved. Dufour does not simply build boats faster than everyone else. He builds an entire ecosystem around them. He backs the development of the Port des Minimes Marina in La Rochelle, and personally founds the Grand Pavois Boat Show, pulling the country's fractured sailing industry onto one stage for the first time. He pushes export subsidiaries into Italy and the United States, chasing a vision far bigger than the French coastline, at a time when most of his competitors are still thinking purely domestically. By 1973, the French government recognizes what has happened. Dufour is the nation's leading production boat builder, awarded the export prize, a European leader in an industry that 10 years earlier didn't know his name. More than 400 boats sold in a decade from a company that started with a rented hangar and a borrowed loan. A workshop that began with a stolen clay model of a deckhouse has become an industrial force, and Michel Dufour, the engineer who was supposed to be building locomotive parts, is now one of the most important men in European sailing. And then at the start of the 1980s, it very nearly ends. The exact mechanics of what breaks first, a shift in demand, overextension after a decade of relentless expansion, a French economy sliding into recession, the brutal capital costs of running a mold and mass production operation at this scale, matter less than the outcome. In 1981, the company Michel Dufour built from nothing fails and production stops. For a company that had defined an entire category of accessible sailing, that had put more first-time families on the water than nearly anyone else in Europe, there is no guarantee of a second act. Companies that fail this publicly, this completely, in an industry this small and this tightly knit, usually do not come back. The molds go silent. The workshops that once ran 3 shifts a day sit empty. Everything Dufour spent 17 years building is, for a moment, one bad quarter away from becoming a footnote in someone else's history of the industry. Dufour comes back anyway. In 1982, the factory reopens, launching the T6 and T7, smaller, sharper, built for a market that has changed under the company's feet while it was down. And rather than retreat into caution, Dufour spends the rest of the decade doing something almost nobody expects from a company that just nearly disappeared. It gets more ambitious, not less. It acquires a longtime rival, Gibbs Sea, absorbing a competitor's designs and dealer network directly into its own, rather than simply outlasting them. It strikes an unlikely partnership with the French fashion house Lacoste, producing the Dufour Lacoste 42, only 12 of them ever built. A strange, elegant footnote that today makes surviving examples minor legends among collectors who track down what's left of them decade after decade. In 1988, the company launches its Prestige range, pushing size and luxury further than the brand had ever gone, followed within a few years by the Prestige 54, 48, 56, and 65. Each one bigger and more opulent than the last, as if the company were determined to prove the collapse had taught it nothing about playing it safe. Then in 1994, Dufour makes the move that will define its second era every bit as much as the Arpège defined its first. The company launches its all-new classic range, the first fully equipped, ready-to-sail production yachts of their kind anywhere in the industry. Before this, buying a sailboat often meant buying a bare shell and outfitting it yourself piece by piece over months, chasing down winches and upholstery and electronics from a dozen different suppliers before you could actually take the boat sailing. Dufour flips the model entirely. Buy the boat, and everything you need is already on it, tested and installed at the factory. It sounds obvious now, decades later, in an industry where fully equipped boats are simply the standard. In 1994, it is a genuine revolution, one that forces every competitor in Europe to scramble and spend years trying to replicate what Dufour had just made look effortless. The company that survived 1981 spends the next 2 decades proving it learned something from nearly losing everything. In 2001, Dufour partners with the Italian builder behind the Grand Soleil line, expanding its reach into performance sailing yachts. The following year, a Dufour Arpège named Sea Scout sails to Greenland and crosses the Arctic Circle, a small, almost poetic detail, proof that boats designed decades earlier for ordinary weekend families are still capable of extraordinary things in the hands of the right sailor. In 2002 and 2003, Dufour launches 2 new ranges simultaneously: Performance, built for speed and responsive handling, and Grand Large, built for comfortable long-distance cruising. A deliberate fork in the brand's identity that lets it compete on 2 fronts at once instead of choosing between them. The Dufour 40 is named Boat of the Year in France in 2003. In 2005, the company begins a long partnership with Italian naval architect Umberto Felci that will shape the look and performance of Dufour Yachts for the next decade and beyond. But ownership, unlike design language, keeps shifting beneath the company's feet again and again, in ways no amount of good boat building can fully control. In 2010, Dufour and its sister brand Grand Soleil are sold to the German conglomerate Bavaria Yacht Group. The kind of consolidation move that, across the boating industry, has quietly swallowed one storied independent name after another, folding decades of craftsmanship into someone else's balance sheet. For 3 years, Dufour operates inside someone else's empire, its decisions made in a boardroom hundreds of miles from La Rochelle. Then, in 2013, the leadership team does something rare in an industry full of buyouts that only ever seem to go one direction. They buy the company back. A management buyout pulls Dufour out from under Bavaria and returns control to the people actually building the boats, on the factory floor, in the same town where Michel Dufour once rented a heatless hangar. The very same year, the Dufour 36P is named both European Boat of the Year and Sailing World's Boat of the Year, as if the company wanted to announce, immediately and unmistakably, exactly what independence still looked like. That independence lasts until 2018, when Dufour is acquired again, this time by Fontaine-Pajot, a fellow French builder known for catamarans looking to expand its reach into monohull sailing. It is this time less a rescue and more a merger of equals, two pioneering French brands combining under one roof, rather than one simply swallowing the other whole. Dufour keeps its name. It keeps its factory in La Rochelle. It keeps producing boats almost entirely in-house, from hull to interior, at a facility now turning out roughly 400 yachts a year, still built by hand in more steps of the process than most modern manufacturers would ever admit to. Walk the docks at La Rochelle today, and you will find Dufour moored beside Beneteaus, Jeanneaus, Hanses, and Bavarias, the handful of names that make up what the industry quietly calls Europe's Big Five. Most of the sailors climbing aboard have no idea that this particular brand once collapsed entirely in 1981, that its founder sold his own car just to build the very first hull, that a fashion house partnership once produced 12 strange, beautiful yachts nobody quite remembers anymore, or that the company has changed hands 3 times in the last 15 years alone, and somehow kept its identity fully intact through every single one of those transitions. What they know is simpler and in its own way more important. The boat sails well. It's comfortable. It feels like it was built by people who actually understood what a family needs out on the water. Because 6 decades ago, that was the entire point of the whole enterprise. Michel Dufour did not set out to build a global brand or a boardroom legacy. He set out to make sailing possible for people who had never been able to afford it, using a material his own boss once dismissed as a distraction from his real job. Everything after that, the Arpège, the 1981 collapse, the Lacoste yachts, the Bavaria years, the buyout, the merger with Fontaine-Pajot, is just the long, complicated proof that the original idea, the one sketched by a bored engineer on a locomotive factory floor, was always worth fighting to keep alive.